Out of physical existence rises light, rises life, rises spring. May we join with the miracle that is springtime, finding the rising light upon us, renewing life within us. Out of the spiritual existence rises faith, rises hope, rises love. May we join with the miracle of Easter time and find that space, purpose, and fortitude to build a better world through love and service. Let us be reborn, let us resurrect with spring and enter into renewed life as we gather together this morning. Welcome to Minnesota Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. My name's Laura. I'm the lead minister. It's good to have you with us on this day. We welcome you in your wholeness, in your brokenness, in your knowing, and in your curiosity. I'll ask that you join me in the words for lighting our chalice this morning, which should be printed over in the chat. And the words this morning come from Sarah Eileen Wall. Out of the flames of fear, we rise with courage of our deepest convictions. Out of the flames of doubt, we rise to embrace the mystery, wonder, and awe. Out of the flames of hate, we rise with the force of love. Each week we set aside a few minutes for the joys and sorrows of the congregation. I can light some candles as people share. You can share either in the chat or you can share by unmuting yourself and just respectfully taking turns. I do want to light the first candle just for our hearts. As we have been watching the trial this week, it has been difficult and heart-wrenching, and watching so many of those witnesses and what they're carrying, the sadness that they still are carrying, the trauma that they carry, guilt, a lot of them. And so I just want to light a candle for all of the emotions that are going on as we continue to watch that trial. And then to counter that, I'm going to light a candle of joy also, because I heard that yesterday we set a new record and vaccinated 4 million people. Saw it on the news this morning. So that's amazing. So candle of joy. Barb, what do you have?
It gave me a bit of joy to read in yesterday's Star Tribune that the the Jewish Federation of Minneapolis, I think, has started a month-long initiative called Clean Speech Minnesota. And their goal is to remind us all to resume disagreeing when we have to disagree, but disagreeing respectfully. And you can, even if you're not Jewish, you can sign up to get kind of a daily 2-minute email with a little video to remind you of some of the ways you may have gotten careless.
Thanks, Barb. Does anybody else have anything to share today in chat or in person? I have a hard time believing that there's no joy or sorrow going on in any of your lives. Maybe you've all just become shy.
I have a joy that we get to look for Easter eggs outside because it's gorgeous out. And there's actually an online Easter egg hunt for all you use. So check the Friday email because that would be a joy too.
Yes, candle for outside. We had a puppy play date last night. Fantastic.
I have another joy. Oh, go ahead, Candace.
I've enjoyed this morning. I got FaceTimed and got to see all my grandchildren, outside playing and having a great time. And just those little things, we've been able to not be able to have as much, and I'm not taking it for granted. I just love seeing them. I saw them earlier last week in person, and then just to see them by FaceTime this morning and throwing kisses to me, even the little ones, it warms your heart.
Yes. I have another joy. Today, for the first time since last summer, I'm hosting my grandson and his wife for an indoor Easter meal. They are both vaccinated, and so am I. Actually, I haven't had indoor company for over a year. We've eaten meals outside in the summer.
Yeah, so that joy goes to everybody who's getting to have a little newfound freedom with things that they couldn't do before. Oh, and the Twins won yesterday. We'll light a candle for that, but it is baseball season. There's some bit of normalcy that has returned. There's lots of celebrations to be had. I'll light a final candle for joys and sorrows and concerns that remain in our hearts, and ask that you join in our sun response, which Richard will cue up for us. Thank you, everyone. And next we have a retelling of sorts of the Easter story, although it's a fairly traditional telling of the Easter story from Maria. So here we go with that.
This is a story that is so important that it has been told from one generation to the next for 2,000 years. The author and illustrator writes of this version of the story, it is the world's greatest story, burning with history, passion, and tragedy. I decided that the best way of expressing this epic drama was to treat it like a grand opera, to create the sets and place the characters within them, capturing the symbolism of the crucifixion and resurrection. He won the Kate Greenaway Medal, Great Britain's highest honor for a picture book. He writes, "Let us sharpen our wits and pencils and make sure that what we write and paint will fly the child into a world of joy, wonder, and imagination. We must write to help build a happier and more peaceful world." The Easter Story by Brian Wildsmith. Once, a long time ago, a little donkey was brought to Jesus. The little donkey had never been ridden before, but Jesus spoke gently to him, and soon he stopped being afraid. Jesus climbed onto the donkey's back, and they set off for Jerusalem. As Jesus and his friends drew near the city, there were great crowds standing along the road. The little donkey was amazed to see so many people. Some had spread their clothes on the ground. Branches cut down from the palm trees were spread there too, all for them to walk on. "Hosanna!" the people shouted. "Hosanna! It's the man who comes from God." By the time they reached Jerusalem, the crowds had grown more excited. Some people asked, "Who is that sitting on the back of the donkey?" Others replied, "It is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee." The little donkey lifted his head proudly as they entered the city. The little donkey carried Jesus through the streets until they stopped in front of the temple. People came from all around to pray there. Jesus went inside and saw that it was like a market, full of people buying and selling. Angrily, he drove them all out, shouting, "It is written, 'My house shall be a house of prayer, not a den of thieves.'" Then every day that week, he taught and healed people in the temple. The donkey stayed with Jesus in the city. Thursday was a holiday, and on that night they walked through the streets to a small house. Jesus went inside to have supper with his friends. Through the window, the little donkey saw Jesus breaking the bread. "Take and eat this," said Jesus, holding the bread. "It is my body." And the donkey watched as Jesus lifted up a cup of wine. "Take and drink this," Jesus said. "It is my blood." After supper, the little donkey followed Jesus and his friends to the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus said to them, "Sit here and keep watch while I pray." The donkey sat and waited, but everyone fell asleep. Suddenly, a crowd of people came into the garden. They were led by Judas, one of Jesus' friends, and they seized Jesus and dragged him away. Judas had betrayed his friend. The rest of Jesus' friends ran away. The little donkey and Simon Peter didn't run away, but followed the crowd through the city. 3 times Simon Peter was stopped. "Are you a friend of Jesus?" people said. Simon Peter felt afraid. "No," he said, "not I." At last they came to the house of Caiaphas, the high priest of the temple. The donkey heard Caiaphas ask Jesus, "Are you the Son of God?" "I am," Jesus replied. The high priest said, "You have heard these terrible words. How can any man speak this way of God? What do you say?" "He deserves to die," everyone cried. The crowd left Caiaphas's house and took Jesus to Pilate, the Roman governor, to see that he was punished. The little donkey watched as Jesus stood in front of Pilate, the chief priests from the temple, and a huge crowd of people. "Are you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. "Those are your words," said Jesus. The priests then accused Jesus of many things. "Have you no answer to make to them?" said Pilate. But Jesus didn't answer. "What shall I do with him?" Pilate asked the crowd. "Crucify him!" everyone shouted. "Take him and crucify him then," said Pilate. "I wash my hands of him." So the soldiers took Jesus away. They put a crown made of thorns on his head and made fun of him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They gave him a huge cross of wood and forced him to carry it. "If only I could help him," thought the donkey sadly. But a man came out of the crowd and helped Jesus to carry his cross. The little donkey followed as they led Jesus to a hill outside the city. There they crucified him between 2 thieves. Late that night, a rich man named Joseph asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. He wrapped the body in a clean linen sheet. It was too heavy for him to carry. Joseph placed the body of Jesus on the donkey's back, and the little donkey carried it to a new tomb where it had been cut out of a rock. Joseph laid the body inside and rolled a huge stone in front of the entrance. Early Sunday morning, Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Mary Magdalene came to the tomb, and when they got there, they found that the stone had been rolled away and the body of Jesus was gone. The donkey saw 2 angels where Jesus' body had been. "He is not here," the angels said. "He is alive again." Mary and Mary Magdalene left the tomb, and the donkey followed until they came to a garden. A man was standing there. It was Jesus. The women were frightened, but Jesus said to them, "Don't be afraid. Run and tell my friends to go up to Galilee, and they will see me there." Jesus' friends were so happy to see him again. He stayed with them for 40 days, teaching them about the kingdom of God. But Jesus knew that it was near the time for him to leave this earth. One morning, he went up to his Father in heaven. The next day, one of Jesus' friends took the little donkey back to his house, and the donkey stayed there for the rest of his life, remembering the kind and good man he had carried on his back to Jerusalem. I want to tell you a few things that might help make this story make a bit more sense. The thieves in this book are in the temple, and they're trying to sell things for more than they're worth. Like, imagine someone trying to sell a piece of candy for $25 instead of 25 cents. During this time period, people didn't agree on whether or not Jesus was the Son of God. So he was crucified. And crucifixion was a really common way for someone to be punished during this time period. The part of the story that's the most surprising is that after Jesus died on the cross, he came back to life and taught his friends for 40 more days. Then he went to heaven. That's the part about the resurrection.
Thanks, Maria. I feel like I was back in Sunday school in my Lutheran days there. Always a good reminder. Those are the lessons that many of our Christian siblings are getting today, and I have my take on it all in a few minutes. But first, we have time for the offering. I want to remind you all, pledges, get your pledges in. And we're not going to post the links on the screen during the music because I have special music for you today. So it's over in the chat. So you can give using the Give Plus app, or of course you can go to our website that's menvalleyuu.org, and you can click the donate button on the top. So we're blessed to have Lark playing 2 musical pieces for us today. She played one at the beginning of the service, and we've got another lovely, lively spring piece from her after the message today. So I thought it put something else for us in the middle for our musical interlude during the offering. So this song was produced by the UU Association, and it puts together 2 of Andre Day's songs. It features Nicole Rameau on lead vocals, Todd Simon on piano, Romier Mendez on bass, Dante Pope on drums, the Loved Into Being virtual choir. That was a choir that was put together for a national stewardship service that people could use if they wanted to. We did our own, but I love the song and wanted to find somewhere to use it, and it works so well with the message today. It's directed by Jen Heyman from the All Souls UU congregation in DC. This is Rise Up for Something.
You're broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can find the fighter, but I see it in you, so we'll walk it out. And move mountains, gonna walk it out. Move mountains. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day, I'll rise
Let's be clear about this. It isn't the same thing as being sick and getting better. It isn't changing your mind at the last minute or pushing away from the brink. The only way to be born again is to die. The phoenix doesn't just go up in a blaze of glory. It feels the fire lick up and sizzle every feather until each quill becomes a column of flame carried straight to the core. Whatever the legend of rebirth, there is always time in the fire, underground, hanging on the cross or the tree. Don't skip over that part of the story. If you would be reborn, you have to die. But what then? After the dying, how are we to rise again into new life? The earth, the hero, the God, you and I. How does any of us find our way back from the valley of the shadow? The same way that we die. Walk into the light. Those words are from Len Unger's poem, Born Again. She wrote that for winter solstice in 2016. That fall felt like a death of sorts to many of us in the wake of the 2016 election. It is no exaggeration to say that parts of our spirit or hope felt as though they had died. And we did spend some time in the tomb, fearful and unknowing about what was ahead of us. But as that metaphorical stone was rolled away when the previous administration took office, we did not remain in the tomb. We walked toward the light and we rose as best we could. Maria shared with us earlier the Easter story of the end of Jesus's life. To recap in my own words, Jesus is a rebel in his own time. He's pushing against his own religious structure a little bit and asking people to pay more attention to caring for one another, and to do that even when you're different from one another, even when you're enemies. His teachings upset other religious leaders who wanted their religion to be more defined by rules than relationships. And he also, of course, upset the government, the Romans. They see Jesus's teachings as dangerous because Jesus is dangerous, and also he's a Jew living in Roman occupied territory. So we have to remember that part too, that though Jesus is a Jew, it's the Romans who are in control of the territory that he lives in. So the Romans think that Jesus must be stopped, or else that his teachings, Jesus's teachings, might lead the Jews or some of the Jews to an uprising against them. So the Romans decide to crucify Jesus. Crucifixion was a horrible form of death used by the Romans. Those sentenced were nailed or tied to a huge cross, tree, or wooden pole, and then they were just left there to die. Sometimes it would take hours, sometimes it would take days. You can imagine how horrible a death it would be, but it doesn't end there. You see, the whole point of crucifixion is to send a message to the people that they want to behave better. You know, the Romans wanted people to behave. They wanted to keep them in fear so they wouldn't uprise. And so they would subject them to this violent and agonizing death. And then they would leave those bodies on those crosses or those poles or trees to rot long after their deaths. And they would have these all along the major roads and travelways. There would be crucified bodies in various states of living and dead and decayed. Life in ancient times was gruesome. But here is where the story of Jesus takes a different path. Because after he died, a man asks Pontius Pilate to take Jesus down from the cross so that he can put him in a tomb. Wait a minute, this part of the story always trips me up, because I'm like, didn't I just say that crucified were left on the cross for many days, weeks, sometimes even months, to keep people from committing crimes or rising up against authority? Yes. So why would Pontius Pilate let this man, Joseph of Arimathea, take Jesus down to bury him with dignity in the tomb, doesn't that defeat the whole point? Indeed, I think it does. But this is perhaps where our story goes from plausible history into something beyond that, into a myth, into a moral story, right? Because the reality is he probably wouldn't have been taken down. Next, we get more of that idea as some women who loved Jesus go to the tomb 3 days later to anoint the body of Jesus, which was a customary way to care for the dead in those days. And they find that the stone at the entrance has been rolled away and that the tomb is empty. And they are told by angels that Jesus has risen from the dead. Unbelievable, right? This story is the center of Christian faith. And at their churches this morning, they are singing and shouting, Alleluia, he is risen. They are celebrating the resurrection of Jesus and his coming back to life. But what does that all mean? Well, some Christians believe that Jesus died as a man, but came back as God to save those who believed in him. Some Christians. And some other Christians believe that Jesus died as a man and rose as a community of believers who wanted to live out a message of loving one another. And there were big arguments about this in the beginning of the church, way back in the 100s and 200s and 300s and 400s. And I'm going to be honest, they're still arguing about this today, 2,000 years later. What did it mean? They don't even know, and they're Christians, right? And Unitarians and Universalists have argued about it too for hundreds of years. In fact, the Unitarian and the Universalist churches separately long ago were both founded on some of the very arguments about what does it all mean. So there we have it. Arguments about the resurrection. Nobody has the one lane of truth as to what it is or what it means. And so I'm going to give you my take on it today for what it's worth. I do believe that he rose as a community. That's evidenced by the gathering of our Christian siblings today. But more importantly, I think he rose as a message that love is greater than fear, that love is greater than our differences, that love is greater than even death. That's the message I take from the story. And rather than getting hung up on the unbelievable details of the story, angels, body rising after death, I just try to focus on the message, the moral, if you will. Through love, we can always rise again. Through love, we can always rise again. And that's a message worth hanging on to. Lynn Unger, who wrote that poem that I read more than 4 years ago, she knew that. She knew that we would need to walk toward the light, that to continue, we needed to continue to walk toward love if we were going to rise again in the face of an elected administration that was rooted in oppression and fear. And we did make it through all that, and we learned so much along the way. Mostly we learned just how popular fear, oppression, and discrimination were in our country. A lot of our liberal bubbles were burst because there was a lot more discrimination and oppression and fear than any of us had hoped for. But in spite of the oppression trying to nail us to a metaphorical cross, we rose again in community. We rose up in the streets against racism and in study and discussion groups to learn about dismantling white supremacy, decentering whiteness, and what all those terms mean. We learned about our own fears that we still hold in our hearts and in our culture. And we came to the conclusion that we might create something better. We rose in rallies that promoted women and science and the earth, fighting against sexism and climate change. We rose to renew our status, we did as a community, as a welcoming congregation to the LGBTQ community. And I will ask that some of you continue to rise and attend the upcoming Bloomington City Council meeting on Monday, April 19th. I'm doing a plug here, where they're going to have a city discussion on the citywide ban of conversion therapy. So if you're able, please go to the Bloomington City Council meeting on April 19th. I did put it in the Friday email, and I'll keep it in there for next week. I can't go. I have another appointment with Beacon Interfaith Housing. But we rose, and we continue to rise. We rose against xenophobia at Dar al-Farouk on Fridays, welcoming and making safe our neighbors' arrival at the mosque week after week. That still goes on every Friday at noon. We rose against hunger and gave away more money to a charitable cause than we have in any of the years that I've been here, perhaps the highest amount ever, Dale and I both thought. Indeed, we rise. Like the song says, we rise up again. We rise like the day, and we'll do it 1,000 times again and move mountains. But the message of the Easter story, we would be doing it wrong if we just left it as a message, because it's a call to action. It's a call to rise, right? To roll back the stone and to make a new day better. To quote another recently popular song, this one by Hoosier, it's not the waking, it's the rising. It is the grounding of a foot uncompromising. It's not forgoing of the lie. It's not the opening of eyes. It's not the waking, it's the rising. But the darkness comes again, death comes again, and we find ourselves back in the tomb, waiting for the stone to be rolled away that we might rise again. This last year has been like no other. More than 500,000 deaths in the US and nearly 7,000 here in Minnesota. We've endured loss and sacrifice. It has taken a toll on our mental health, our physical health, and our spiritual well-being. And for now, it feels like we're still in the tomb, but with increased vaccination rates slowly rolling that stone away, it feels like there's a little bit of light coming in, and we can kind of see that there's going to be a new day out there, but we're not quite there yet. We're not quite there. This year has been unprecedented by way of the pandemic, but also by way of the lessons that we've been given about how to take care of ourselves and one another. We have all learned of the deep sacrifices that we are capable of in order to preserve the greater good of all. We have restricted our own personal wants and needs for the sake of others. In doing so, we have literally saved countless lives. That's about as big a lesson as there is. So what will we do with that? What will we make of the new day when it comes? How will we rise again out of this? We have learned that we're capable of changing everything when we have to. We can take that forward and change everything else that we need to. We can rise for our planet, decrease our carbon footprint, stop pipelines, adapt a more plant-centered diet to decrease harm to the environment caused by, big farm animal factory practices. We can come up, if we can come up with vaccines in less than a year's time, I'm pretty sure that we can work to end our dependence on fossil fuels if we just do it. How will we rise? We can rise against racism. We can continue to understand our own country's racist history and its long-term harmful effects. We can work to dismantle white supremacy culture, decenter whiteness, and instead promote multiculturalism. We cannot change our past, but we can change our relationship to it and forge a better path forward. How will we rise? We can rise against economic injustice. The pandemic showed us how flawed our system is. As those most economically vulnerable suffered, while the upper classes actually improve their economic standing because of investments. Now, right now it's estimated that a third of Americans are either low income or below the poverty line. And the gap between those with the least and those with the most is just widening and widening. Example, Jeff Bezos made $73 billion during the pandemic. That's just during the last year. I just want to say that $73 billion, that's 2.2 million times more than what his average employee makes. What if we rose up not only to pass a livable wage, but a maximum wage? What if you can't earn more than 100 times than your lowest paid employee? I mean, talk about economic stimulus, everybody would move up. I don't believe the resurrection is a story about a historical event that happened thousands of years ago. It was not Jesus who rose to save us. It was meant to be us rising to save us. That's what we believe, isn't it? That we can build a better world through love and service. That's our mission. That we can rise and create true beloved community. The stone is rolling away. The light is shining in upon us. How will we rise from this tomb to meet the new day? And I want to close this morning with some words from Reverend Joan Javier Duval. May you emerge from whatever burdens and sorrows have weighed you down and have enclosed you in a tomb of darkness, out into the light of this spring season, joining hand in hand in this community of creation, lifting up an everlasting message of love, peace, and liberation. Happy Easter. Thank you, Lark. A couple of things over in